I need to talk to you, Judy, before I leave. I want to talk to you.
This is not exactly a planned event, but here we are, back in our usual little restaurant, talking about this, that, and the other. And with us we have Mark Bassell, am I pronouncing it correctly, has joined us at the table, and we're going to talk about a show he has planned for Comcast, having to deal with jazz music, and maybe more specific than that. But first of all, who in the world are you? What brought you to where you are now? What brought you to this place and time? What's your life experience so far?
Judy McClellan is responsible for my being here.
And
the famous and the dynamic and scintillating Judy McClellan got on and said, Mark, if you really want to publicize this website that you're doing, you should come down and see what we're doing with our cable TV. And I resisted this for at least 6 months. Mm-hmm. And finally, I had nothing better to do, and she got my attention. And I decided to make an appearance. And at that point, I got intellectually interested. And things took a very different turn, because I started to think about presenting what I was doing in a format very different to anything that I know anything about. And it was bad enough to put it online, because I knew how to do half of the job.
Yep.
I knew how to go to YouTube and put links in an HTML format and copy pictures from Google and so on. So my website looks interesting. It's called theecstaticpresentation.com.
And that's ECSTATIC?
ECSTATIC.
And the ecstatic presentation. Is it ecstaticpresentation.com or the ecstatic?
The ecstatic presentation.
Don't miss the. Of course, if you Google ecstatic presentation, it probably is going to come up, right?
It'll probably come up.
That's right, and it's an introduction to black music.
That's what
that's natural.
It, because it started out purely as American blues, jazz, and gospel. But as I got into it, it became more of a website about the 1960s. And the reason I say that is because I was really dramatically influenced by a guy named John Coltrane. I managed to hear him live in 1963 at the Newport Jazz Festival.
Saxophone?
Yeah, tenor sax.
Tenor sax, okay.
Wow.
I ain't been the same since.
Wow.
He destroyed me. I think I would nominate him as the best musician that ever came out of this country, and possibly the world. So as I grew up,
it's quite the endorsement.
I started to pay more attention to things that influenced them. Mm-hmm. One of the things that influenced them was Indian music. And that's how that got
Native American or Asian Indian?
No, Asian Indian.
Asian Indian, okay.
Ravi Shankar, Ali Akbar Khan, those people. So I did an intense study on Indian music, and I included that on the website. And when I say intense, I mean intense. It's better than the Indian websites by Indian people, because I did a lot of searching.
So how do sitar players influence a tenor sax?
They played modes. Do you know what a mode is?
No, I don't.
Well, if you look at a piano and you go from C to C, that's the C major scale?
Right.
If you start the C major scale on D instead of C, and go from D to D, playing the notes in the C major scale, you have a D mode.
So you're on the right key, so everything's off by a tiny bit. Some of the 3 of the notes, 4 of the notes are off by half step.
That's a minor key.
Yeah. Okay.
So you go from C major to D minor.
Yep.
But it's the second mode of the C major key. So it becomes a way to relate to playing different harmonic backgrounds from something that's musically consistent. You're playing modes. So if you play part of this one scale and then you go into part of another scale, you can run them together where it's seamless. So in other words, there's one point where it's purely a major scale, and there's another point where it's purely a minor scale, but the notes haven't changed.
So you get that whole different feel with a minor scale.
Yeah.
It is kind of a little bit more, more somber feeling.
And you get, subdominant, dominant, half diminished. You get a lot of different kinds of scales out of it.
Studied that. Some of the subdominant, dominant, all that stuff. Sort of, it rings a bell, but it's very technical.
It's very technical, yes.
And this was all happening in the 1960s, you were saying?
This is when it came out.
Okay.
It really started in the 1940s,
Okay.
the late 40s. There was a fellow named George Russell who wrote a musical theory called the Lydian Concept of Chromatic Tonal Organization.
Okay, and chromatic are all the notes, you scale with all 12 of the notes.
Yeah, look at that. You can
Okay.
count up to 12. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
Because you're going from 7 to 8, which is the scale, and you're throwing in all of the half tones, so you're getting 12.
Which is, I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Indian music has, the scale's different, there are more
Notes
in between.
Notes in between.
Like
Yeah.
microtones.
Quarter tones or microtones.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's sort of like that. It's sort of chromatic in that sense. Except
Indian
more like
music-
hypochromatic.
Indian music is modal.
Okay.
That's the dominant feature of Indian music. Western classical is primarily harmonic,
Okay.
with some modality. So you have a musician music that's mostly harmonic with some modality, and another music from somewhere else that's mostly modal with some harmony. And when you put them together, things get a little strange.
Wow.
Sounds.
Yeah.
So I'm
Sounds
trying to
like,
remember
yeah.
the name. There was a classical violin player whose name escapes me at the moment. Yehudi Menuhin.
Okay.
He did an album with Ravi Shankar in the 1960s.
Yeah.
Blew everybody's mind. That was the beginning of a lot of what I would call high-end fusion music. In other words, not rock that copied a little bit of crap and called it, Indian influence.
Yeah.
But two musicians that were masters in their own fields that got together and did something different. And this kind of music influenced a lot of the people that were playing seriously, that had good technique and weren't interested in just banging and thudding. Because rock music is, I cannot tell you what musicians thought about that when it started.
Oh, I can imagine.
And
It's kind of simplistic in a lot of ways.
After it started to make money, their attitude changed,
Yeah.
because they were interested in making money too.
Yeah.
But when it wasn't making money, they had no regard for it. It was money that made it.
But wasn't rock music influenced by rhythm and blues and
Yeah,
rock music?
rock music is United States music.
Right,
Some of it is good. Let's not criticize it 100%.
right.
Some of it works out. But the basic thing is people want to make money. And they want people to stand up and clap and cheer.
course.
So it's a different
Sell
approach.
records.
Miles Davis, for example, used to turn his back on the audience at one point and ignore them.
Wow.
He said, why pay attention to these people? They don't know nothing.
That's
Now it's all about performing for the crowd.
Pardon?
And now it's all about performing for
Yeah.
the audience.
give the folks what they
And
want.
if
give them
you
what
look at, let's say, the Rolling Stones,
Yeah.
and think about how much money they made and what they did, and you look at someone like Miles Davis, there's a real difference in how they influenced people.
Yeah.
In my opinion, Miles will be remembered 100 years from now.
Right.
The Rolling Stones are not going much further than those, I'm trying to remember, those vocal comedians. That from whence Mickey Katz came from. You know Mickey Katz?
Now,
A Yiddish...
but it makes sense though. But it makes sense though that if you think short term, which most people do, they think within the span of their lifetime, or even within just a portion of their lifetime as being this huge amount of time. But to think forward, imagine what people will be.
Right.
What will they really be giving credit to 100 years from now? What will they really look back on and say, that was good? And probably, like you say, probably it's going to be a tiny piece of, I think 5% of all popular music is good, and the other 95% we forget about anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, who remembers Tommy James and the Shondells anyway?
Yeah.
Or well, I do, I guess.
Well, but I mean, now singers, or what we call, music, they call people who perform the music, they're known mostly for performing, not really like the musicianship,
So anyway,
Yeah.
I wanted to present a show that touched base on all of the different musics. And,
Yeah.
I'll start with gospel music. Everybody has heard of it,
Right.
but there's very few people that can say anything coherent at all
Right.
about gospel music. And I did a number on it. I have hundreds and hundreds of groups, which most people have never heard about, which have had like an influence from under the table. Some of the things you'll listen to and you'll think about rock and you'll say to yourself, oh my God, is that where that came from? From that? You know, because some of it is intense. The other thing was, I was a psychology major too, and when I used to study psychology, I would think about character types.
Yeah.
That, you know, you go to one culture and you have this type of a character type, and you go to another culture and you have another character type. And one of the things I started to think about with black music is that when you get involved with the church, you have a whole different set of character types for females, especially females with children, because they have a tendency to bring their kids up on the stage with them and push them and complain if they don't like what they're singing about and so on. And some of it gets really intense. I've listened to several things where women really have an intense relationship with their daughters while they're performing. And I think about that in terms of what those relationships mean. And they're on a whole different level than a person that's not black is going to get into with their kids.
So is that I don't know, I wouldn't put value judgments on anything, but did you see that as being kind of a good thing or kind of an overbearing kind of thing? Was it helpful or harmful to the kids?
Interesting in the sense that it contributed to musical development in a way that people that copy the external forms of what they're listening to never think about. They don't know why that call and response thing is there, and they don't understand that as a communication. Then I went into the blues community, and the blues community kind of represents black people that live in the street. So you're in a very tough world when you start talking about that today in relationship to how people perceive civil rights. You're going to get criticized in a heartbeat if they don't know what you're talking about, because it's not going to sound good, but it's true. And that's another music where things really got really intense.
How so?
And all the forms were copied by jazz. They did it more technically. They did it faster. They turned things upside down and inside out. But that was the foundation.
Like the song Rock and Roll Music that talks about modern jazz and try to play it too darn fast. Was that the evolution of jazz at some point where they tried to...
It started faster and it got faster.
Yeah, making it faster rather than...
If you listen to what Dizzy Gillespie and Charlie Parker did in the late 30s and early 40s, the speed of that is unbelievable.
And where did the blues come in? The blues came...
They played blues with that. They played in a modern harmonic form.
Okay.
There are three forms of blues.
Yeah.
There's country blues and everything that develops it. And rock blues has come out of country blues more than anything else. The second form of blues has been less influential, but most people know about it. I call it modern harmonic blues. That's what Charlie Parker did. I sometimes call him the most important, and sometimes John Coltrane the most important. I go back and forth on those two. A very important musician. He introduced things that no one ever thought about. And modern harmonic blues he influenced people that came up before him. There are only too many people that have done that.
Yeah, so the
people they have an influence that goes forward, but his influence not only went forward, it went backwards.
To older performers.
Yeah, everyone was influenced by him.
Wow. And
then you have Ornette Coleman. And Ornette did what's known as atonal blues, where there's no scales, there's no chords. If you take 3 or 4 different blues pieces, you take a piece out of this and a piece out of that, a piece out of that, and you change all the keys, and you run them together with a little bit of chromatic fills in between them.
Yeah.
It sounds, and maybe you miss a beat here and add a beat there. It doesn't sound logical. But after you do it for a while, you can learn how to play it like that. So it's like Indian music. People talk about, how can you play a 13/4 rhythm?
Right.
How do you count like that? And I said, I don't count like that when I play those rhythms. I just count 2 and 3.
So you play? You play?
Drums too. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So you work for a little while and you break it down into 2 and 3, and everybody can count the 2 and 3. Nobody can miss that.
So
And after a while-
it's just a combining, uncombining, and recombining
Yeah.
of those twos and threes.
That's how I worked with it.
Seems like a logical way to approach it.
I barely count to 13 sometimes, you know. So it's too many numbers. So.
Wow.
So when you think about music, that's what I think about. Now, you know, I was also, being white, a little bit of an intellectual. I'm interested in psychology,
Yeah.
and
Right.
physics. I never thought about becoming a musician when I was a kid. But I was fortunate enough to meet a guy named Sonny Chirac, who was a genius, a musical genius, who is not appreciated in today's world at all, which is unfortunate, because he was one of the people that, as I said on my card, he put something down and left it there. It's impossible to pick up, play modern guitar without playing his stuff. If you ever heard of King Crimson, the rock group,
Yes.
their first record,
Which is what part of Emerson, Lake and Palmer evolved out of there.
you'll hear Sonny's stuff stolen.
But they also delved into kind of classical kinds of things too.
They were good musicians.
Yeah.
They could play fast and they played it correctly.
Yeah.
Let's not get too critical of people that play fast and correctly.
What do you think of the idea of the notion of, you have a lot of people coming, one person comes out of one group, one person comes out of another group that's been together for quite a while, and they kind of mix and match and branch off and do something different, and sometimes people call them super groups because they're like leaders of or main front people from different groups getting together and forming.
You know what I think about that?
What do you think about that?
In the 1950s, a lot of people were junkies. They took drugs. And getting these people to deal with anything in a logical way was a little difficult. And modern jazz is basically a music of harmonic organization. What you want to do is you want to learn one chord and how to substitute, you know, one chord for another and change the harmony and the way they interrelate and add some complicated rhythms. And that's how they did. That's what modern jazz was, bebop. You could take 5 junkies that were good musicians, that studied musicians, none of whom had ever met each other, and put them in a studio and give them a musical piece with harmony that they could hear and recognize, but they'd never played before. And you could get these guys to play something beautiful by the end of the recording session. Now that is music. And that is what happens when you put people from different backgrounds together to play with each other.
Right, yeah.
So whatever I think about that, I think it's good. And I wish there was more of it today rather than less of it,
Yeah.
because that's where things come from.
Have you ever been present in any of those sessions when they were recording or, you know?
I haven't spent a lot of time in a recording studio, but I spent a lot of time at one point arranging concerts for people. And I presented my friend Sonny Chirac in front of any number of different groups. And I recently met a girl that I used to be fond of when I was a teenager. And we were talking about God knows what. And she said, blah, 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 blah. And you brought in Sonny Chirac and made nothing but a lot of goddamn noise. And I laughed. So that was noise to you.
Right.
To me, it wasn't noise.
Well, sometimes with music you have to, I don't know necessarily, you don't understand it the first time you hear it, but you don't understand it the first time you hear it. You don't appreciate it so much, but if you hear it again, it makes more sense and it sort of grows on you.
So anyway,
that's could be
touch
good
base
music.
on Indian music.
Yeah.
I mentioned blues and gospel. I'll talk a little bit about Islamic music for a second, and then I'll get into Jamaican stuff.
Right.
Islamic music is a music of color. They have some of the strangest instruments in the world. And, for example, a flute is an instrument you get a sound from blowing into a hole. And an oboe is a double reed, not a single reed. Saxophones and clarinets a single reed.
Right.
Oboes are double reeds. And they have instruments that touch bass here in a lot of different ways. So if you listen to, let's say, Armenian music, you can hear a lot of things that are very similar to things that you've heard before, but the coloring is so different. And it makes an effect. It's had a big influence on Western music, and for political reasons, trying to say anything good about Muslims is a rough deal in today's world.
A lot of people will just take offense immediately.
Yeah, I mean, I was influenced at one point by a group known as the Naqshbandi Sufi out of Pakistan.
Sufi, that's a sect of Islam.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Sufi, there's some kind of a relationship with the woolen clothing that Moses was supposed to have worn. So they have a relationship that goes back in time. And they were the people that were involved in that financial scandal that was going on in Pakistan back in the 90s, which kind of makes it kind of interesting. I mean, you bring something that was in the past forward, and you're going to get relationships that are difficult to understand. And if you're interested in what's going on in the modern world, that is not going to make a good impression.
Yeah.
But on a musical basis, a lot of these people are very good. And they are the most peaceful people in the Middle East. The United States has not made friends with the right people if they want to keep the energy level down and the violence level down. They should pay attention to people that, regardless of what they think, you may not agree with.
Well, it's tough when you take a group of different religious groups under the auspices of Islam, just like if you take everybody under the umbrella, the broad umbrella of Christianity, and lump them all together, you're going to get a probably not fair to a lot of those different groups.
It's not fair to a lot of those different groups.
Yeah.
But the Christian world is mostly peaceful at this point in time. The violence has gone away. And the Islamic world is not peaceful. And whether it goes away or not, we'll see. So anyway, to touch base on Jamaican.
Yeah.
Jamaica is a country that's small. It's an island nation in the Caribbean. And they got every single religious group that you can think of there. So you got Jamaicans that are ordinary Christians and Jamaicans that are Rastafarians.
Right.
And they're a different group. This symbol here, if you show this symbol to a policeman, they'll say you're making a vulgar symbol about a woman's genitals.
Right.
But in that world, it's the lower triangle of the Star of David, which is a whole different trip. And I have a picture of Haile Selassie at one point on the site.
Haile Selassie, Ethiopia,
making this symbol. Because there's a relationship between him and the Rastafarians. Rastafarian comes from Ras, which means master, Tafari, which was his pre-ordination name. So there's a direct calling to Haile Selassie in the name Rastafari. And some of these people are, I don't know what the word is, but you see them walking around with weird clothing and apples on their heads,
Right.
crockery around their neck, and
Right.
this is the strangest clothing you've ever seen.
Like Bob Marley.
Much stranger than that.
And don't they associate it with smoking marijuana too? Rastafari?
They call it the chalice link.
Oh.
Marijuana is a sacred herb.
Oh.
And as I was doing this website, I was thinking about what I did when I was a kid. Oh my God, did I used to do that?
Was it a
Horrible.
sacred herb back then?
No, we didn't use that terminology.
Ganja, weed.
Yeah, I remember those words. That's an African
Ah.
term, ganja.
Okay, I've heard that more in connection with Jamaicans than.
Right, and reggae.
But it all came
Yeah.
originally from Africa, I'm presuming. Yeah.
Marijuana? I
No,
don't
not the marijuana, but the term ganja.
Oh.
Oh, I don't know. I think the Jamaicans are a unique group.
Yeah.
They're real. They say Africa, but it's Africa by their definition. And I might add that their influence has gone into Africa. And modern African music today is Jamaican music added to what they already had. It's intense, and I did a study of that on the website. I have a whole page with a couple hundred people on it of African reggae. Very different issue. And people should listen to it because it's beautiful, beautiful music. The other thing that they do, which almost nobody knows about, is Jamaican gospel. And some of these people are intense.
Oh, yeah.
I have some things on there that I don't know how to describe them, but modern Jamaican gospel has combined what reggae used to be with hip-hop, and they have a different music. Am I talking too much?
No, I missed the cue.
Oh, you
That's too low. We're at how many minutes?
2.
2, thanks. Peace to you.
So, Jamaican gospel is different than you were just talking about. How is it different?
There's 3 or 4 different kinds of music that I would call Jamaican gospel, which have a limited relationship with each other. The Rastafarians are different from the ordinary Christians. And believe it or not, there's a Hindu strain that came into this. Because Indians moved into that part of the world at one point. And Indians from India.
So we're talking about a real soup.
A real soup.
Not just a phony bowl soup.
No, it's not a phony bowl soup.
But a real mixture, a mishmash of styles, blending and unblending and reblending.
So Indians moved to Jamaica?
I believe they're most common in Trinidad, actually.
Oh,
but
okay.
there's a couple places that, and I forget what they call that music. They have a special name, the Indian music that merged with black stuff. It's very strange music. Because Indian music is an intellectual music.
Now you talked about harmonics, the scales, and we also talked about briefly about the rhythms. What's more important to you in music, or is there a more important side of
rhythm? Is more important.
Rhythm is more important. Well, coming from
now
a drummer. Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
When you listen to a 4-beat and you listen to the way you quote white people unquote play it,
Okay.
they're emphasizing the 1 and the 3.
Okay, we're going to have to break it off there.
We lost the 2 and the 4, but that's cool.
Yeah, okay, we lost the 2 and the 4. Okay. This has been Progressive Soup. David Stevenson, Emily Volpentesta, co-host, and Mark Bassell, who's really enlightened us quite a bit about a very, very complex subject.
And when's your show going to be? Do you know?
I have an appointment tomorrow with
okay.
a different group.